A rogue planet is on a collision course with Earth. Humanity decides to escape by building millions of homemade spaceships, but after they blast off, something goes wrong. Our story follows 5 people on board one of those ships. Welcome back to the channel. This is The Mad Knives, a 5-album, 5-movie sci-fi concept project, and today we're talking about the writing of The Mad Knives, the systems and methods that I'm using to write this whole story. So the main thing I want to talk about is something called the story circle, which was popularized by Dan Harmon, one of the creators of Community and Rick and Morty. And basically, this is sort of his boiled down, simplified version of some of the thoughts in Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. And it's a framework that I've been using to help me write the albums and movies as things are going along with the Mad Knives. So it starts out pretty simple. It's a circle, like you would expect, a story circle. And there are 8 points around the circle that you go around, sort of like going around the face of a clock. And they can all be explained with one word or a very short sentence. So at the beginning is you, which is the character or characters in the normal world, just where they live and how they exist. The next one is need. A need arises of some sort. Something in the universe needs to be done. Next is go. The character or characters leave their normal world and venture out into the unknown in an effort to solve the need, solve the problem. Next is search. So this is the act of like actually searching for the thing that they need. Find at the bottom of the circle here, which sometimes requires some new skill or some other teammate. So in the search, the characters would adapt and grow, and that growth and adaptation will lead them to find the thing that they need. The next step is take. Take, which is actually taking the thing that you need, but it's usually paired with paying a heavy price. So you hear people say, get what you want, pay a heavy price. Sometimes you pay a heavy price while you're getting what you want. Sometimes it happens right after you get what you want. Next step is return. So now the character or characters will be returning to home since they've gotten the thing that they needed. And the last step is change. So the idea is that the characters return home having changed from the experiences that happened in the bottom half of the circle here. This is a very basic outline. I've seen people go far more in depth with this and split it like left to right and top to bottom, and sort of given some guidelines about whether you're in the top of the circle or the bottom of the circle or the right hand side of the circle or the left hand side of the circle. There are people far more talented and experienced in writing than I who have really good videos going over better ways to use this. This is just the basics. You, the normal world, need something, go to find it, search for it. Sometimes this search includes gaining new skills or meeting new teammates. Find the thing that you are looking for, take it, whatever is involved in taking it, and at the same time generally pay a heavy price. Return the journey home to your original setting, having changed from the experiences in the circle. That's the basics. So let's talk about how this maps onto the Mad Knives. And this video, I'll be avoiding spoilers the best that I can, but we are going to take this opportunity to do a very basic story outline. So how it maps to the Mad Knives, I go right around the circle. You is the normal world. So that's the Mad Knives before the catastrophe, just living their everyday lives. The you section of our story lasts maybe 2 seconds, because the very first thing that happens is we find out about the rogue incoming planet. So we get shifted into need sort of right away. Need is the next step. The need is to escape the planet. Go is the spaceship actually blasting off. That's a pretty easy one to envision. The Mad Knives and everybody else leaving the planet. Search is them looking for what they need. Another good point about the story circle is that it's a little bit modular. You can sort of spend more time in early stages and less time in the bottom of the circle, or you can have most of the story happen at the bottom of the circle and just sort of tie up the loose ends. So in our scenario, need actually arises a couple different times. So the first need is to leave home. They go, and that need gets satisfied, but as soon as they're out in outer space, another couple of needs arrive right away, and they begin searching within those needs from the secondary catastrophe. So once they blast off and get into outer space, something goes wrong. That presents a new need. So they go about searching, finding, and taking to settle these needs that happen in outer space. Our story spends a lot of time in the bottom of the circle, which typically is sort of the hell realm, you know? So the bottom of the circle is where lots of things are going wrong and lots of things are unsolved. And a big part of our story happens in the bottom of the circle. So while they're in space and things are breaking down, I would say that leads them all the way through search to take. And the take actually leads them to the return. So I will say at the end of the first movie, they are heading back towards where they believe the site of the former Earth would be. And as far as change is going, over the course of the things that have gone wrong in outer space, the Mad Knives have absolutely changed. And they are changed in a really big way. And the one way to describe it that doesn't go too much into spoiler territory is that many of them are becoming brainwashed over the course of this story and what's going on with the extra disasters in outer space. So they're heading back towards home at the end of this, a home that is no longer there, and they have changed without a doubt. So the other thing to think about in our story circle, and sort of leads us into how this matters for a multi-album project, is that the Romantics, which is what I call the Doctor and the Farmer, the Romantics are on their own circle concerning their relationship, while this other greater circle is happening in the Mad Knives universe. So this actually ties into what I have written down here next, why it matters for a multi-album project. So these story circles can be fractal. So you can have a story circle that represents the entire story you're telling, and then within it, each of the characters can have their own story circle happening within the broader story, and they can all be sort of like chronologically shifted or happening at the same time. And then for the Mad Knives, because this is a 5-album, 5-movie project, there can be sort of like nested circles within each other. So I'm going to try to draw this with a line graph like I try to do sometimes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's 5 albums, 5 movies, right? So we have presumably 5 story circles that are happening along this timeline. So each movie has its own circle, right? And then within each of these circles are character circles, you know, that can be doing whatever they're doing in the story. I'm also imagining the first 2 movies create their own circle. For one of the characters, the first 3 movies create a circle. And then ultimately, of course, I want the whole thing to create a circle. So this framework is a way to approach the way that this all is tied together, and sort of like the way I use it is to keep track of the stories and make sure that I'm actually writing them, make sure that the things that are happening aren't just a bunch of random things, but that they're actually falling around the arc of stories as we generally understand them from our sort of human history. So this is ambitious and looks complex. So how did I actually do it in this case? And the way I actually did it is kind of simple, really. So I wrote the songs first without worrying about the story circle. But I did write them all with like a general space theme. And as I was writing them, the lyrics started to kind of present a story without me really realizing it. So after I wrote the songs, I placed them around the story circle. So I really drew a circle like I did on the first page here, and I put the song titles around the circle. And I just sort of rearranged them and moved them around and tried to make them make sense to me. And in this example, there are 10 songs, so I was plotting 10 songs around an 8-point circle. And that's when I realized that a lot of this story takes place in the bottom half of the circle. And I placed them around the circle generally by lyrics and like vibe of the song, because as musicians, we all have an idea of how we think an album should flow, and I was just sort of exaggerating off of that into this story idea. And then once I had them placed around the circle, I rewrote a little bit. Not a lot, really. That's because of my last point that I'll write in a minute. But I placed them around the circle, listened to the whole thing. The story started to form a little more concretely in my head. And then I went back and edited some of the lyrics and some of the songs a little bit to sort of better suit the portion of the story circle that they were in. And lastly, and this is very important, I was lucky. Still am, if I'm being honest. This all kind of fell into my lap, and it took minimal editing and massaging to get it into a story structure. I'm not really sure how or why it happened, and if I'm being really honest, when it comes time to do the second album, I'm not sure I can do it again. But this is how things took shape for the first record. So I'm gonna have later videos that go a little more in depth on specific songs and characters and certain parts of the structure. I'm not going to do them yet. I would like to walk us back around this story circle just as a really brief recap of the story of the first movie. The Mad Knives are on Earth living their normal lives when we find out that a rogue planet is on a certain collision course with Earth. Because of this need, everybody has to build homemade spaceships to get off the planet. They do that, and we go. After we blast off, something goes wrong once humanity is already in outer space. Because of something going wrong, there is a search for a solution that involves the Mad Knives on their own, trying to survive in outer space and looking for other people. What they find is a solution that they didn't expect in the beginning, and it requires them to make some changes to their game plan. They make the changes, but in making them, everybody, for the most part, starts to get brainwashed, and that is the heavy price. They start returning home, having changed. The change is the brainwashing, and the home doesn't exist anymore. That is roughly how this story goes. There are lots of things that I still didn't say, but that's basically it. So I'm looking for collaborators for all of this. and various types of collaborators because this is a big project with a large scope. So I'm looking for singers, especially for the first album. That's the most important thing. 2 male singers, 2 female singers. I'm looking for musicians in general for the next 4 albums. I'm looking for visual artists for anything from storyboards all the way to final animations. So that means animators as well. I'm looking for choreographers because there are certain sections of these stories that involve dancing that will need to be written and animated. And also, of course, like mix engineers, mastering engineers, marketing folks, etc. So if your talents fill any of those gaps and you're interested in this project and the story the way I've described it so far, please do reach out. You can find more details on the website, themadknives.com. You can catch up with me on Instagram at themadknives, or DM me or comment here wherever you're seeing this. I would really appreciate anybody who wants to help. Please come help, because I've gotten this off the ground. I have the framework built. I understand where it's going. I know what we need, but we're starting to exhaust my actual artistic talents. So it's time to bring on some collaborators so they can add some sauce to this whole thing. That is it for this week. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time. Hit the outro.